Now, Human Rights Day is observed every year on the 10th of December, the day the United Nations General Assembly adopted in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. The UDHR is a milestone document that proclaims the inalienable rights which everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Well, today also marks the end of the 16 days campaign against gender-based violence. To help us discuss these human rights issues, Eric Landberg, who is the Finland ambassador to Kenya, joining us live from Nairobi. We also have Florence Machi, the campaigner from Equality Now. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for joining us here on Bottom Line Africa. Florence, let me begin with you. Tell us a little bit about the history of Human Rights Day and the theme for this year, which is Recover Better, Stand Up for Human Rights.
I think for me, the International Human Rights Day speaks a lot to the work we do around the rights of women and girls. And if you look at the journey of women and girls, you know, we've come a long way in terms of even just the right to vote, the issue of, you know, the right to be represented at leadership positions. So for me, the history stems from, if I look at using my gender less as a woman. But also it is critical for all of us to know, and those of us who are watching, that today becomes one of those days that many women who are women activists or women's rights activists around sexual and gender-based violence can at least put a smile on their face, because today the High Court of Kenya delivered a landmark ruling against the government of Kenya in terms of having violated the rights of the women who underwent sexual violence during the 2007 post-election violence. So for me, this landmark ruling that puts the rights, the responsibility of providing rights for sexual violence survivors to the place of government. Failure to prosecute, failure to provide victims with effective remedies sits at the feet of the government. So for me, today is a beautiful day, having looked at the work we've done on sexual violence and seeing that this landmark ruling sets the stage for other public litigation, public interest litigation cases that can be brought forward to remind the government of what they're supposed to do in terms of providing the rights for sexual violence victims.
Right. Ambassador Landberg, like I mentioned, today also marks the end of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And with COVID-19 and the greater call to stop the spread of COVID-19, many people, resorted to going back to their homes, working remotely, but also this resulted in a spike in cases of domestic violence globally. So as we celebrate Human Rights Day, where do we stand in terms of gender-based violence?
Well, thank you for having me on the show, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, indeed, we've seen, as you say, an incredible surge in gender-based violence now as a consequence of the COVID pandemic, and this is by no means something uncommon. It happens normally in crisis, be it an economic crisis or a health crisis, that we see this happening when, for instance, women are confined to their homes actually and not being able to get out. They are confined there with their abusers, and the normal health services and the support services are not there. We've seen during this year, in fact, 243 million girls and women being subjected to physical and sexual violence perpetrated by an intimate partner. So it's really a global phenomenon and something that we need to speak up about now. I'm very happy about this campaign. It's high time that we speak up about this. It's not acceptable. We all have to take responsibility in talking about the prevention, making people aware of this problem, where it stems from, what can be done, and also discussing the response, as was said by my colleague here on the show. It's very important that the authorities are able to respond to these kind of cases when survivors are seeking help, when they are seeking justice. Finland is going to start a program together with the Kenyan authorities to work on these issues together for the next 3 years. We are investing 5 million euros to cooperate, to see that the coordination between different authorities works adequately in situations where the survivors need help. And finally, I want to say also a specific thing that we also need to involve men in this work. We need to have positive role models for men who are not caught up in the usual gender stereotypes, but are taking a positive masculinity role here and providing good examples. I want to raise the issue of President Kenyatta, who has promised to eradicate female genital mutilation by 2022. This is the kind of messages that we need to be putting out there.
I'll come back to you, Ambassador, on the specific measures on the collaboration between Finland and Kenya. But Florence, let's speak about the clear impact of gender-based violence and the help that victims then can get. There's been talk of establishing enough safe houses in the country where victims of gender-based violence can seek refuge from. What is the state of the establishment of such centers so far?
All right, so within this, was that my question?
Yes, yeah, let's have you respond to that, Florence, and then we'll come back to you, Ambassador.
Okay. All right, so within the COVID-19 season, and I think we're still on it because the numbers are going up, we saw the government of, county government of Makueni come together and actually put together a shelter, the first state-run shelter in this country. And you know, the reason why we need state-run shelters is because taxpayers, the women who are being violated are taxpayers. Number two, when civil society organizations run shelters, it is not sustainable. But when government runs shelters, the coordination that the ambassador is talking about is able to happen. Coordination between police, coordination between the health facilities, coordination within the judiciary. So shelters are critical, especially when we have lockdowns. So when we had lockdowns, it meant the private-run, civil society-run shelters could not function. Most of them had to close, and then the survivors had nowhere to run. So a state-run shelter can be, you know, there are guidelines for it, so they can be put in place so that survivors, you know, can get access to a government-run shelter, which is coordinated between Ministry of Health, between Ministry of Interior, and between Ministry and between the county government. So that is the state that we have right now. Only one. We are seeing positive movement within ministry, county government of Kisumu, and we are seeing positive improvement and movement around that same area in the county government of Nandi. So soon we at least are pushing for a state-run shelter in each of the counties to meet survivors' needs. Also, just to link up with what the ambassador said about the president's commitment to ending FGM. Kenya is also the co-chair in the Generation Equality, which is a movement that is following up on, you know, equality for all sexes, but also looking at different aspects. And Kenya is co-chair on the GVB sector. So we would like to see also the president speak out positively around ending GBV as a whole, because you realize FGM is one aspect and one form of GBV, but we want to see all aspects, whether it is incest, whether it's, you know, domestic violence, that the country comes out strong in 2021, speaking positively around ending GBV, committing itself to making sure that things are put in place. We have seen polycare centers being launched, meaning one-stop centers that a survivor will go to a police station and get all these services. So when this happens, coordination will happen, and then the survivor, we have a survivor-centered approach to dealing with GBV. So we're looking forward, for me personally, at 2021, where I want to see government commitment and I want to see movement around coordination. Thank you.
All right, Ambassador Lambag, let's come to you. So the message around the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence was clear, and that was, let's break the silence and speak up. But many issues leading to women not speaking up or victims not speaking up is just that, lack of coordination, lack of, shelters, lack of, if I get to the police, the case won't go anywhere, and I might have to go back to the same toxic environment. Speak to us about these coordination measures in conjunction with the Finnish-Kenyan government and how this is likely to help.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, I want to note, I think we've seen a willingness and a strong interest on the part of the Kenyan authorities to work on these issues with us. So I'm very positive from that respect, and I also want to commend Kenya for last year arranging this ICPD conference working on the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women. So this was, I think, very, very positive steps. And this project that we've been planning together with the Ministry for Gender is really aiming at raising the awareness among those duty bearers who are supposed to help the survivors, the police, the healthcare authorities, the social authorities, but also helping them to better understand the situations, to plan their activities, and also to get budgeting, proper budgeting for their activities. I think this is really important. In Finland, we've seen that unless these issues are properly budgeted, things will not happen. We have chosen to work together on the county level in 3 different counties in Bungoma, Samburu and Kilifi. And the idea is to try to develop models there that could be rolled out in the rest of the country to get sort of good practices and to create in these different environments good practices and get experiences that we all can use then when trying to develop the situation countrywide.
All right, and Florence, let's talk about the fact that even as we endeavor for a post-COVID-19 world, there are those who say human rights must be at the center of this recovery process. What does this look like for Kenya? Because COVID-19 really was fueled by the deepening poverty, rising inequalities in the country and in society at large.
Yeah, what it has showed me, I mean, the COVID-19 has laid bare our systems, has laid bare our structures, has laid bare where we need to fix the house. And the Swahili saying that says, usipoziba ufa utajenga ukuta, meaning if you don't seal a crack, you'll have to build a whole wall. I hope that the cracks that the COVID-19 has shown us will make us have a survivor-centered approach when it comes to dealing with survivors of sexual violence, but also give us an opportunity to have protective mechanisms. For example, we had children not going to school, and in one county, like the county of Nandi, we had 7,000 girls getting pregnant. For me, that is worrying, because where were the protective mechanisms for these children? Where was the place for them to speak up? Where was the place for them to run to when they were under threat? So if we can start putting structures as per our commitment to the Africa Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child as governments, so that we're not just committing internationally, but we are putting mechanisms in place, which include what the ambassador has said, putting our budgets in line with what we commit, putting our budgets in line with our policies, so that survivors, A, are protected. We prevent these things from happening. But when they do happen, then we work around making sure that the structures work for the survivor. Then number 3, what I'm also seeing is that then the wheels of justice should stop grinding slowly. Remember, I've mentioned to you a case when I began that was litigated in 2013. And in 2013, today is when we are getting a ruling. 7 years later, you can imagine those survivors going to court over and over again for 7 years to get a ruling. We need to have specific courts for survivors of sexual violence, the way we have ones for election disputes, the way we have one for corruption, where there's a time limit to which that case should be run, so that there's the wheel of justice run faster for survivors. That's what I want to see, as we look at post-COVID, because it has laid bare, our cracks in the systems.
All right, well articulated there, Florence. Ambassador, your final comments as we wind up. As we mark Human Rights Day, in your view, what gains have been made in the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and how can these gains be incorporated moving forward to help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, thank you. I think the main gain that we have achieved through this, and there's people always say that there's always opportunities in crisis, and I do believe in that. I think that this, as my colleague was saying, this crisis has shown us where the challenges are, where the problems are, and it has also created a momentum for us to be able to build on now when we talk about these issues, to raise awareness, to make people aware of where the problems are, create political will to change them, and also to raise funding to deal with these issues, because it's crucial that we have funds to deal with these issues moving forward. But I'm optimistic. I think that we have a very good opportunity now to do this, and this campaign was crucial in that respect. But it's not enough to have one campaign. we must continue. There are many important campaigns going out there. For instance, the one called He for She. It's really important that we have these kind of comprehensive campaigns going on around over the world all the time to raise these issues, because they are not going away.
Ambassador Landberg, many thanks for your time. Eric Landberger is the Finland ambassador to Kenya. Also joining us in this conversation, Florence Machio, who is a campaigner for equality now as the world marks Human Rights Day. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for your time. Let's take a short break here on Bottom Line Africa. Do stay with us. Still more to come. Let's leave you with Destination.